Hello again. I am State Senator Coleman of the Second Senatorial District here in the state of Connecticut, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Senate Reports. I am your host for this program, and today we have with us a special guest, State Representative Bruce Morris, and we're going to talk a little bit about Representative Morris's role and activities at the Connecticut General Assembly. Welcome to the program, Representative Morris.
Great to be here with you, Senator.
Okay. So why don't we begin by having you tell us a little about yourself to acquaint the viewers with yourself.
Where do you want me to begin?
Well, when did you first get elected to the General Assembly?
I ran in 2006, so I began in 2007. So I am in the middle of my 5th term as Deputy Speaker of the House and Chairman of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus.
Okay, I know you serve on the Judiciary Committee as well.
Yes, I do.
See you frequently with that committee's activities, but what other committees are you serving on?
Human Services and Energy and Technology. That was a new committee for me last year. Prior to that, I had spent most of my tenure on the Housing Committee.
Okay, were you former chair of the Housing Committee, if I recall?
Vice Chair.
Vice Chair, okay. So, and your district is?
140th District, the great city of Norwalk in Fairfield County.
Okay. And significantly, you're the current chair of the Connecticut Legislative Black and Puerto Rican Caucus. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as we get into the program. I will disclose up front that by marriage, you and I are related, my father's side of the family. And tell us about your family.
My family. Well, interestingly, I'm elected in 2006. My father was also a state representative.
Yes, your father was historically the first African-American deputy speaker of the House of Representatives.
That is correct.
Guess who was the second?
Who was the second?
That's me. Yes, too.
Okay.
But in any event.
Good to know. Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up in the city of New Haven, born and raised in New Haven. Went to private schools. Mom worked 3 jobs. Dad worked 2 in order to help my brother and I move forward, make sure we had a good education. So always hearing about politics, I determined early in life I would become a lawyer and go into politics.
You know, it's interesting you should say that because people oftentimes ask me how I got interested in politics. And like you, I grew up in New Haven, and I observed that we had 2 family members, one your father that served on the Board of Aldermen in New Haven, and Junior Davis was also on the Board of Aldermen. And during the times when they were running for re-election, they would often ask, you were probably too young at that point in time, but they asked Melvin and my brother and I and some other of the relatives to do some canvassing in their behalf. And that was my first exposure to politics. And that's how I sort of got into the back of my mind at some point in my life that someday I might like to do something like this.
Well, trust me, they enlisted me at an early age as well. I remember one of my dad's first primaries, I was riding up and down the street on a 10-speed bicycle with a bullhorn.
Okay.
And always had the voting machines in the front of the house, his signs. So I grew up and always hearing the kind of conversations that was going on. Many of the cap agency directors, and certainly my uncle, Eldridge Davis Jr.
Yeah.
I always heard the conversations between my dad on the political side and mom and her affiliation with church. It basically was a family that's inbred about public service. Because in addition to being state representative, I'm a minister. I'm an ordained minister.
I wanted to get around to that. Good.
Yeah. So it's a lot of the inbreeding, what I've gotten from both my dad and my mom. Okay. I think that shaped me into being the individual I am today.
And you're married?
I'm married to Gail Veronica Morris.
A lovely lady.
Yeah, we got married in '79, so someone else can do the math for me.
Okay.
I won't embarrass myself and get the years wrong.
Children?
I have 4 children, 2 twins. I think my twins are 30, going to be 34 next month. My middle boy is, the twins are Gwen and Bruce. We actually named them after my mom and my dad. My middle son is Christian Anson Morris. He's a year older. And then my oldest girl, Tashina, she's 43.
Are they all in Connecticut?
No, my middle son just recently went back to Las Vegas. He travels the country,
Okay, yeah.
but the rest of them are here in Connecticut.
How do they feel about your involvement in politics?
Well, my kids, between the politics and ministry, I'm sure they miss me being home, miss a lot of that, but they're proud of what I do.
Mm-hmm.
They understand what I do and why I do it. They've been very supportive of all of my campaigns.
Okay.
In fact, not just my children. My last campaign, my grandchildren did a lot of telephoning and door-to-door knocking with me. So I'm teaching them the ropes a little early.
Great.
But also teaching them just the importance of being involved. You know, why it is so necessary. It isn't, I mean, I'm their granddad, I'm their dad, and I'm not going to be here forever. So similar to my dad, I'm concerned about legacy. What do you leave?
Mm-hmm.
And what's going to happen with the next generation? Particularly when we've been dealing with an achievement gap for so long. I really talk to all my kids about education. But beyond education, how are you getting involved in policy making and understand the fact that politics governs everything from the cradle to the grave? All of my kids and grandkids will tell you that that's what they hear from me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what I stay on top of all the time.
Is it likely that any of them will run for office themselves?
Well, actually, I've got a few of them that have said so.
Okay.
It's interesting. I was in business at one time too, so they're making their choices. In fact, I've got a couple of my grandkids that have said that they will go into office. My children, they're not interested in running for office, but I've got a few grandchildren that have shared that there may be a desire. My children espouse more of the business side of what I've been involved in. From the middle 1980s into the middle 1990s, I owned an electrical construction company.
I remember that, yes.
Yeah, largest minority electrical contractor in the state.
Mm-hmm.
So my kids, they like business part, because I always tell them America's business is business.
That background came in very handy when we were trying to draft and negotiate the municipal exemption bill, trying to assist minority contractors and subcontractors in getting work from some of the municipalities around the state, pursuant to the state set-aside program.
Certainly so. And in fact, the state set-aside program, and as it is designed today, is a result of the efforts of when I was in business. Actually, myself and another gentleman here from Hartford, George Millward.
I remember George, yeah.
And the National Association of Minority Contractors, and we worked together hand in hand with the senators and representatives there at that time to create this opportunity for small businesses, but particularly minority-owned businesses.
Yeah, I did some work with that organization, and there was some affiliation with a national association, and I remember a forum being conducted in Hartford, and Perrin Mitchell came, who was then a U.S. representative from Maryland, if I'm not mistaken, but he came to Hartford and gave the keynote address and really provided some insight into the workings of minority contractors and minority business enterprises. And I think with a great deal of foresight gave us the clue that was really support for minority business enterprises and contractors was really the foundation of the economic progress that our communities should be making.
Certainly. And here we are 30, 35 years later. And I'm glad that I had that experience. And along with you, you've been a stalwart champion for the longest time around these issues, making certain the contractor bonding and opportunities and financing have been available. So we can't, you've been a champion. I was glad to join your efforts.
I appreciate that.
If anything.
I was glad to have you join my efforts.
But yes, certainly getting that exemption put away with, because there was no rhyme or reason why all these schools were being built all over the state of Connecticut. and minorities are not being given the opportunity to do so. Having been in business, I remember very well when I had 45 employees, half of my employees were Black or Latino.
Mm.
All right. If anyone of color wanted to be a foreman, they were a foreman. I had 2 women that were foreman electricians.
Mm.
All right. The reality is I'm probably getting off tangent where you want to take this conversation.
This is great.
But the reality is if people are tired of paying for all these different social services and things like that, the best thing they can do is create these level playing fields and create opportunities because they don't exist. People do business with people who they're friends with in their inner circle. So you have to legislate this happening. So you'll have businesses such as mine at that time who hired all these people who are now getting Davis-Bacon wages. They're bringing them back into impoverished communities. These are parents that don't have to work 2 and 3 jobs. They can spend the time with their kid after schools. That next generation is going to get a better education. They're turning those dollars around inside their communities. This is the way for Connecticut and the nation to go forward. Mm-hmm. We need to be full players.
In a very real sense, I feel that my role as a senator, your role as a state representative, is to put more people from the communities that we represent in a position to hire mm-hmm. and fire.
That's correct.
Mostly hire, I hope, but I think the point is to put folks in the position of owning businesses and giving them the opportunity to employ people from our communities. Mm-hmm. And I think in a very real sense, that is what will accomplish the kind of progress economically that needs to be accomplished in order to address some of the challenges that are confronting the communities that we're representing.
Agreed, because we're always deemed to be a liability when in fact the human capital, the human potential that is there, the intellectual potential that is there, has just been untapped because of systemic racism. But one of my proudest moments was when after I'd been in business for a good 3 to 4 years, when I had white contractors that said, "Listen, Bruce, we're not having you bid this job because you're a minority. You are bidding on equal footing. So mm-hmm. you're doing the same thing as any other contractor, and help them to change their paradigm, the way they think and the way they looked at minority contractors. So there's a benefit for this all the way around."
Absolutely. The other objective is to take emerging contractors, most of whom are a minority, and to grow them and develop them to the point where they are mainstream. Not necessarily majority contractors, but to stand on equal footing and compete with the majority contractors.
Oh, that's correct, because as I said, America's business is business. I recall to this day, one of my first contracts I was bidding for, and there was another gentleman, and I'm telling him, "Listen, the law says X, Y, and Z," and the gentleman reached in his pocket and he pulled out a wad of dollars and he says, "Bruce, it has nothing to do with a black or white." And this is a gentleman mm-hmm. who was very prosperous, but only had a 6th grade education. Mm. Because you don't need a college education to be great in the trades. He pulled it out. I said, "Bruce, it has nothing to do with black or white. It has to do with dollars." He spoke like Elmer Fudd. Mm-hmm. But it's important for our community to remember, at the end of the day, people really are concerned about what is the value that I can get for what dollars, and the quality based on dollars. And if we can prove that we become part of the mainstream, everyone will support Black, Hispanic, whatever business is, because America's business is business. Mm-hmm. The reinvestment to the communities is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Now, and I would add one more thing to it, and this is why it was so important, even for our caucus this year, the Black and Puerto Rican caucus, because we kind of look at 3 different categories. Historically, we are known, as you're aware, for fighting for great legislation around education reform. And we did that about 4 years ago mm-hmm. with the governor when he first came in. We've always been fighting for reforms. There's always been judicial reforms. We've been known for doing that. But the one piece that was left out was economic reforms. All right, so we put it there together. And I like to always share this because it makes sense. Well, why should a child go get an education, work hard to get an education, when I don't even think I'm gonna get a good job? I don't even think of seeing myself as an entrepreneur. I don't even think of myself even have the ability to go to college. All right. So what helps that happen is, guess what? If I can see people who look like me getting good jobs, my mom, my dad, and people around me in businesses being successful, that makes a difference. I can dream towards that. And I believe that's an attainable dream. All right. In so doing, because we know all the judicial reforms, why do we do them? 70% of those who are incarcerated, they're undereducated or uneducated. It is pivotal. The economic reform is key to our community and the state of Connecticut.
Yeah, I share that view. And we are coming up on a break, and I'm glad you mentioned the last few items that you mentioned, because we're going to get into a little bit more depth in the next segment. But we're coming up on a break, so we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back, talk a little bit more about you, and then get into some of the activities that the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus was involved in this recently completed legislative session.
How do you judge a law firm's success? Cases won, money made, or what the firm does in the community? At Dressler Strickland, we know that success is just the beginning. The true measure of success is what you do with it. For 33 years, we've used our success to help our neighbors and our community. 24/7, 11/22. Whenever you need us, we'll be there. Dressler Strickland, building communities one case at a time.
Summer is almost here, and it's not too early to start thinking about summer programs and activities for your child. They are important for all children, so they won't lose what they learned during the school year over the summer. This way, they will be ready for the first day of school in the fall. And make sure you plan your summer vacation for the days after summer school ends, right before the new school year begins. Remember, learning happens every day.
Welcome back. Again, I am State Senator Eric Coleman from the Second Senatorial District of the state of Connecticut, and you're viewing the Senate reports. I'm pleased to be the host of this program. And during the first segment, we've talked with State Representative Bruce Morris, who is representing the 140th District in the Connecticut House of Representatives. And he's also the chair of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus. The first segment, we discussed some personal aspects of Representative Morris's life, talked a little about his family and his background, his personal background, as well as his business and professional background. We learned that he's a minister, and in addition to that, he's a former minority contractor. And as I understand it, you're working with the school system in Norwalk.
Yes.
At the current time.
Yes, Director of Human Relations for Norwalk Public Schools.
Okay. And I recall very pleasantly work we did together on so-called educational reform. It wasn't educational reform. There was a controversy about a parent who perhaps presided, if I get the facts straight, in Bridgeport, but was sending her child to school in another school district.
Yes, yes.
And unfortunately, that parent was arrested and prosecuted, charged with criminal charges. I think it was larceny.
Larceny in first degree. She was facing 20 years imprisonment for stealing an education.
And obviously, there were many people that thought that that was wrong. You and I among those people. And you sponsored a bill. My my recollection may be a little faulty, but the gist of the bill was to prohibit such prosecutions in the future.
That's correct. We removed larceny for theft of services from a school from the last larceny statutes, because there was existing Board of Education statutes in Section 10 of the statutes that already had an administrative remedy that was used 99.9% of the time anyway. Districts weren't picking up the phone and calling and having people prosecuted. They typically were having a hearing officer sit down with the person and approve whether they live there or not. And they typically were just sending them back to their own home district if they did not live there. They did have the right. They've always had the right to go after them for civil penalties for whatever those costs were. And that's the way it was done. It makes sense. Schools know the difference between, as this parent shared that she was homeless, how to rightfully apply the McKinney-Vento Act, and all the issues around residency. So it really was just a simple exemption of one piece of law, and then strengthening the other statute to make it certain that the cities could recoup those funds. So that we strengthened that language, and this made better sense. This is actually, it's a national issue.
I don't doubt it. It's not the first time it's come up. In my experience, there was a situation where a parent in Hartford was sending her child to a school in Bloomfield, and then Senator Frank Barrows, who's one of my predecessors, raised the issue and tried to undertake the same effort that you took. In other words, just saying that to prosecute a parent for trying to get the best possible education for his or her child is wrong and bordering on immoral.
Because the vast majority, almost in every case, of the people who've been prosecuted for this have always been people of color. In the specific incident that we had a mom who was going to be homeless, but shortly thereafter was arrested for prostitution, for drug addiction. And I think some people felt that she was the perfect stereotype of people who were looking for a good education for their child, and therefore that child should not be able to get a good education. Many others took the position that, guess what, state of Connecticut, you have an obligation to provide a quality education for all children. You are not incarcerated. There's no real penalty the state of Connecticut has for failing to do that. So why would we have a parent, regardless of whether you're drug addicted or anything else, you care enough for your child, okay, that you will seek to do whatever you need to do through the process to send them somewhere else and get an education? Why should that person be looking for, at 20 years, why should that person even be looking at a misdemeanor for that fact? So it's not about poster children, even though they're always targeting people that look the most vulnerable. Interestingly enough, I think some people finally understood that within this nation, we have people who are undocumented residents. They're in our nation illegally, but we provide them with a quality education. We don't give them 20 years. So why should we do that to American citizens?
So that particular bill was one example of some of the work that you and I have done together, and the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus has weighed in on. I've been around in the legislature for a few years, and as a matter of fact, I wasn't a member of the legislature when the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus was established, but I was an intern at that point and was in a position to see the formation and the establishment of the organization. And for the years that I've been a member of the legislature, I'm trying to, but I don't recall a legislative session for the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus that was as productive and as successful as this past session, regular session and special session were. We developed an agenda, and we moved a number of items that were on that agenda. We talked about, in this program, a little bit about the set aside program and the elimination of the municipal exemption, the repeal of the municipal exemption that did not require towns and cities in Connecticut to abide by any of the set-aside requirements and the construction of, as you mentioned, school buildings and other properties and buildings that were financed with large amounts of state dollars.
Quasi-public agencies as well.
Quasi-public agencies. That was biggie. That was.
And you've been there longer than I. You know that this is the type of legislation that we weren't working on for just a year. When I came to the legislature, my very first year in 2007, this was an agenda item.
That's right.
That we couldn't get moved forward. It would always die by the time we got it to appropriations. You know, the committee, it couldn't go any further. But we got it done this year.
That's it. On an earlier edition of this very program, I talked about the Black and Puerto Rican caucus and the size of the caucus in terms of the number of members. I talked just a couple of minutes ago about the establishment of the Black and Puerto Rican caucus. I think that there were a total of 7 members that came together and formed the organization. And now we're at what, 22 members? Or?
No, we're at 28. We're 23 in the House and 5 in the Senate.
Okay.
And you're right. Originally, you started with the Black Caucus when you had Spike Johnson and Boyce Barlow, my father, Otha Brown, and there's a few others. You had like 5 or 6 in the House and 1 in the Senate. And they started out as the Black Caucus until the early 1980s. You had 1 or 2 Hispanics were elected. And that's when it became the Black and Puerto Rican caucus.
Yes, again, hopefully my memory is not faulty, but I think Clyde Billington was the first chair. Clyde Billington was a representative from Hartford, was the first chair of the Black caucus. You're right. Yeah.
Well, but you've been a chairman of the Black and Puerto Rican caucus.
I have. Yeah.
You've got a rich history.
And now you're the chair. I warned you at that point. Be careful what you ask for. But
well, I will say this though, with seriously your support and the phenomenal members that we have within our caucus, because they're hardworking individuals who've risen to very strategic positions. Right? I mean, we're chairing Appropriations Committee, we're chairing Judiciary, we're chairing Housing, and I can go on and on. A Banks Committee. We've got a number of committees where our people are chairs. They're in leadership, where they're in both the Senate and the House. And to have numbers like that, and the people aren't just in positions, but we're able to rally around causes and get things done. As you said, this year, we did education reform before, but we did more significant things again. I mean, now I think it's grade 2 and under. Your kid can't get suspended. We have cultural competency as part of the training that all teachers will receive going forward. We're doing more for minority recruitment to make certain that we're doing more to diversify our teaching force, and even with alternative school programs. On the judiciary side, we've always had all these large numbers of youth who've been incarcerated for long terms. During this session, we got that turned around. I think we tried to do that a couple of years ago and we couldn't. We've done more with juvenile justice reform. And then, of course, the 2 big bills would be the excessive police force and the second chance, which both of those bills have received serious national recognition. And it's all because of this caucus. We did all this within this 1 year. I mean, if I just talk about second chance, you know, for how long we've always, within our urban communities, we've talked about the school zones, drug school zones, and what their impact and effect is upon us. Never was able to get that off the dime. The argument just couldn't move forward. But this year,
it's interesting. Most of the concept regarding second chance have been advocated by members of urban areas, minority communities, members of the Black and Puerto Rican caucus. And I think finally we've gotten the attention of somebody like Governor Malloy, who joined forces with us in order to advance the whole concept of treatment over criminal sanctions for mere drug possession and elimination of mandatory minimum sentences for mere drug possession. It was very costly to incarcerate the numbers of people that we were incarcerating. And in fact, we were over-incarcerating in the state of Connecticut. And the Second Chance bill addressed that.
Well said.
Similarly, our excessive force bill speaks to what has been occurring around the country. And we haven't had any incidents in Connecticut in a while, but when you talk about Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, and Tamir Rice in Ohio, you thought with Eric Garner in Staten Island that things would stop there, and police officers around the country would become a little bit more cautious in their dealings with unarmed people, most of whom happen to be minority. But then the situation in Baltimore occurred with Freddie Harris and North Charleston, Walter Scott. This most recent incident with Sandra Bland and in Cincinnati with Sam DuBose. And I'm actually proud of the bill that we crafted and what that bill, the provisions of that bill seek to address. And I was just interviewed yesterday, as a matter of fact, by the Wall Street Journal, whose reporter said to me that Connecticut is unique because although these types of comprehensive efforts to address police accountability have been mounted in other states, we were the only state that actually passed this far-reaching a bill.
It's interesting. I was with the trainer, the person who put together the program for fair and impartial police training just this week. They're doing this in Norwalk. And she had this same exact remark. She's going all over the country. She's in high demand. But she's remarked that Connecticut has the most comprehensive bill. It is the proper model. And you're right. We took a look at this in a very proactive manner. And not just to say, well, let's just do body cameras. But under your leadership, your wise leadership, you took a number of the different initiatives that all the caucus members had, and you pulled them together under one bill.
You're very gracious like that. We actually worked together on Second Chance and excessive force.
Right.
And your leadership as the chair of the caucus was very instrumental, very significant, very meaningful. And I couldn't have been prouder of the members of the caucus and the way they banded behind the effort to get these bills passed. And they actually insisted and demanded that leadership take up these bills.
That's right. That needs to be said because I will never forget, I'm sure our members will never forget, that the session almost ended without these two bills being raised. And by 9:30 that evening, with only 3.5 hours to go, the caucus decided, no, we're going to stop.
There's nothing more important to do than these bills.
That's correct. And that was the smartest move based on our numbers to really send the message that you can't end the session this way. And we got it done because of that. And I'm proud of all of our members because they stuck together. The spur of the moment, what do I need to do? They came together and worked as one unit.
We got
proud
it
of
done.
them. Yes, we did.
And I'm
joint effort.
Looking forward to next session and what we can accomplish even beyond what we've accomplished in this session. Well,
actually, you brought up something really good because you talked about how it was with the governor's support. And I won't even marginalize at all the report of Senator Fasano.
There was great bipartisan support. I can't say enough about Senator Fasano's involvement and some of the other Republicans and their willingness to weigh in on these issues. I think it made a difference.
I think you'll agree with me. There's at least I sense it. There's a deep level of respect. It is mutual, but certainly the level of respect that has come from all of our colleagues who are outside of our caucus to really hear what it is we have to say and understand that investment in our communities and hearing the solutions that we bring to the table in our communities has great value. My problem in the past has always been that sometimes liberals or someone else think that they've got the way that they're going to fix us. But my sense certainly for the last 4 years, has been other politicians saying, no, they do know what's best. They're coming up with real solutions and we need to get behind them. I think Connecticut's got a good future in front of it.
You've had the last word. As is usually the case, time with you goes by much too quickly. And I think
it's been a pleasure and honor being here with you.
Well, it's great to have you here. You got to come back again.
I look forward to that opportunity. Seriously look forward to that.
Okay, so we'll finish our work in the legislature.
We
and
are,
we'll
you
finish
know,
this conversation
there you
on
go.
another program.
There you go. Next year's got to be an even better year.
Thank
More
you for
work,
being
more
here.
work to do. Seriously, thank you. All right.
And thank you, the viewers, for joining us with this segment or this edition of the Second Reports. Tune in again.